Hi everybody, Matthew Turnage here. Today I thought I'd talk about a question that I think about from time to time, and that's was Wings a quote-unquote real band? Now what do I mean by real band? Obviously they weren't a fictional band like the Archies or something like that. They weren't completely made up and invented. They were real professional musicians working together, playing real rock and roll and putting out real albums. But were they a band in the sense that we usually think of a band like, for example, the Beatles, where all four members are an integral part of the process, or even a band like the Rolling Stones, where you may have two members who are dominant, but the entire group contributes something meaningful and has a legitimate say. And the reason why this question comes up in my mind sometimes is there's a quote that John Lennon made in an interview with Rolling Stone in 1975, and I just want to read it for you. The question that was asked John is this. It says, George told, meaning George Harrison, George told Rolling Stone that if you wanted the Beatles, go listen to Wings. It seemed a bit of a put down. And John's response was, I didn't see what George said, so I don't really have any comment. And then he pauses and says, Band on the Run is a great album. Wings is almost as conceptual a group as Plastic Ono Band. Plastic Ono was a conceptual group, meaning whoever was playing was the band. And Wings keeps changing all the time. It's conceptual. I mean, they're backup men for Paul. It doesn't matter who's playing. You can call them Wings, but it's Paul McCartney music. And it's good stuff. It's good Paul music, and I don't really see the connection. So what John was saying there, of course, the Plastic Ono Band, as he says, was conceptual. They would call themselves the Plastic Ono Band, but it was not a fixed band. As the promotion for the Plastic Ono Band said, who is the Plastic Ono Band? You are the Plastic Ono Band. So the idea of the Plastic Ono Band was that it was an artificial conceptual band. It would be John and Yoko and whoever else happened to be playing on stage, and whoever else was in the audience and singing along with them. If you were participating, you were in the Plastic Ono Band. So it really was not a quote-unquote real band. It was a concept, as John said. And John was saying he saw Wings as almost the same thing, that it was just whoever was playing with Paul was Wings. And I think that's an interesting way to look at Wings. I do think a lot of us, whether consciously or unconsciously, tend to think that way, because when we talk about Paul's solo discography, we usually include Wings in that. I know certainly when I did my ranking of Paul's solo albums, I included all the Wings albums in there. Occasionally you will see a reference, like I remember during the promotion of McCartney 3, it would say McCartney 3 is Paul's 18th solo album. And that would not include Wings, and also not include Ram, which was credited to Paul and Linda. But for the most part, when people talk about Paul's solo discography, they're going to include the Wings albums. So in that sense, I think many Beatles fans tend to discount Wings as being a separate group, and as John says, being Paul and whoever was playing with him through that period. And so it's an interesting question, as you look through the history of Wings, because there are times where Paul definitely seems to want to make it a fully realized band with all equal members. Now, of course, they started out Wildlife. It's presented as a band on the cover. You see the four members at that time. It doesn't say, it doesn't identify on the front cover, obviously, who it is at all, but the back cover is Wings, Wildlife, not Paul McCartney or Paul McCartney and Wings. It's Wings. And it does in the liner notes let us know, yes, that is Paul and Linda McCartney who started this band. But it's Wings. It's promoted as Wings, as a group, as the four members. Now, when it came time to record the next album, this is an interesting anecdote. I'm reading from Man on the Run by Tom Doyle. So this is during the recording of Red Rose Speedway. Of course, Glenn Johns was involved in that early on. And it says here, on day one, McCartney had asked the producer, Glenn Johns, to consider him just the bass player in the group in an attempt to underline his apparent desire for Wings to be a democratic and, quote, normal band. Of course, when the blunt Johns began to treat McCartney just as he would any old musician, the shirking band leader, he says, grew disgruntled. So, and that's a pretty well-known anecdote. Paul says to Glenn Johns, hey, I'm just the bass player. And he apparently did want to, this version of the album, the double album, is very much a band album, I feel like. Or at least, it feels more like a band album because you get some more Denny Lane songs. You get Linda singing a song here, and also with the live tracks, I think really shows them off as a live unit very well. But the album that was released, of course, came out because of the poor sales of Wildlife, relatively speaking. The record company wanted to make sure everybody knew that it was Paul. So, of course, the actual release cover is just Paul on the cover. It's Paul McCartney and Wings is what the album is labeled as. And it's much more of a Paul-focused album in terms of the tracks that were released. And in that anecdote, we're told that Paul wanted it to be perceived as a band. He told Glenn Johns, hey, I'm just the bass player. But of course, Paul didn't really want it to be treated like just the bass player when Glenn Johns pushed him on it. So, so Paul seemed to want to at least foster this perception of Wings as a group, that he was just one of the guys in the group. Any review of the song credits on either of those first two Wings albums would have shown that Paul was clearly the dominant force. He was the one writing most of the material, singing most of the material, almost all the material, and it clearly had his stamp on the music. Then, as we get to the period of the first lineup change, around the time of Band on the Run, here's another quote I wanted to read from Man on the Run, and this is discussing the period where Henry McCulloch is getting ready to leave the band prior to Band on the Run, and how the other members felt about the band. It says, behind their happy hippie family facade, the discontent within Wings had been stewing for some time. For all McCartney's protestations and gestures to the contrary, the supposedly democratic band was in reality little more than an autocracy. Even the compliant Denny Lane would get irked any time one of his friends asked after the guitarist's boss. He wasn't really my boss, he now insists. He was just a mate I knew for many years before I even joined Wings. But I allowed him to be the boss. That was fine by me. So here again, Wings is described as an autocracy, not a democracy, that Paul was really in control. And I feel like as you come in to this album, Band on the Run, this is clearly a Paul McCartney album to my mind. Now, Denny Lane is on the album throughout. He did have an impact on the music, on the songwriting. We get to hear him sing a bit on No Words. But other than the lead vocal contribution, I see Denny's contribution in Wings. I don't mean this to be unfair to him, but to me, I don't see that as being significantly different from, say, Eric Stewart's contributions in the 80s on Paul's albums, or even Elvis Costello on Flowers in the Dirt, somebody who's truly collaborating with Paul and having an impact on the recording and the direction of the music, but it's still very much Paul's music, that Paul had the final say in shaping the music and ultimately what was released. And of course, as this album comes out, Wings is a three-piece. We have all these other celebrities on here to give the full feel of the Band on the Run on the cover, but it's really just Paul, Linda, and Denny. And then on this album, I believe Linda does contribute some keyboards. Denny, of course, plays some rhythm guitar. I think he may even do some keyboards as well. But everything else is Paul. All the drumming, all the bass, lead guitar work, 90% of the vocals. This has Paul McCartney stamped all over it, and is very much a Paul McCartney album. Now, coming off of that, of course, Paul decides he wants to take Wings back out on the road and develops a new lineup of Wings for touring purposes. And we get this album, Venus and Mars. And I think it's interesting. This would have been the album that would have been out around the time of John's quote where he's calling Wings a conceptual band. And, of course, there's been some lineup changes at this point. But this album moves us a little bit more in the band direction, I feel like, because, you know, not only do we have some Denny Lane vocals on here with Spirit of Ancient Egypt, but you've got Medicine Jar where Jimmy McCulloch has lead vocals, and not only that, but writing credits. So you're starting to see material that Paul didn't have a hand in writing show up here on Venus and Mars. And then as they come into the next album, Wings at the Speed of Sound, here on this album, it really is, Paul is really trying to show Wings as a band on here, with contributions from all members. So you get, again, Denny on The Note You Never Wrote, although that's a Paul song, or Paul was one of the writers on the song. But then you also get one of the best songs on the album to me, Time to Hide, which is a Denny song that Paul did not have a hand in writing, plus another Jimmy McCulloch track on here with Lino Junco. And two songs that Paul did write or co-write that have other vocals on there. You've got Cook of the House with Linda and Must Do Something About It with drummer Joe English. So all 5 band members sing on this one. It gives it, as you're listening to it, a more democratic feel. And even as you look at the writing credits and you see that 2 of those songs Paul didn't have a hand in at all, makes it feel much more like a band. And of course, the lineup didn't last long. Again, although both had a hand in recording this album, Jimmy McCulloch and Joe English were gone by the time it came out. We're back to a 3-piece. We're back to Paul again being more dominant in the songwriting. We get a couple Denny vocals on here with Children, Children, and Deliver Your Children. And, you know, Denny, of course, is very prominent on the front and back cover. But I think you listen to this album and it feels like a Paul album. And Paul gets to the last lineup of Wings here with Lawrence Juber and Steve Holley. And you know, again, we've got some contributions from all the members, but this is another album that feels very, very Paul to me. Back to the Egg. You know, and lineup changes, I think, or even several lineup changes in a short succession are not necessarily indicative of not being a quote-unquote real band. I mean, you think about Deep Purple. The Deep Purple of 1968 was very different from the Deep Purple of 1970, which was different from the Deep Purple of 74 and the Deep Purple of 75. But even with more lineup changes in a shorter amount of time than Wings had, I still think of, you know, Deep Purple is clearly being a real band. But one of the marks of all those lineup changes is that the sound of the band changed. Those 4 albums I just showed all sound extremely different from each other because of the nature of the personnel changes led to such a difference in the band's sound. Now, Wings' sound did change over the years as you know, things grew and developed, but there's very much a through line of Paul McCartney throughout. So I think John is definitely right on in that quote where he says, you know, he says, you can call them Wings, but it's Paul McCartney music. I mean, even with those songwriting contributions that I mentioned from the other band members, it's clearly Paul McCartney music throughout Wings's history, and Paul dominates it. Maybe it's not as clear cut as when you think about the last 20 years in Paul's solo band. It's very much Paul McCartney, and those are his backing musicians. I think it would be unfair to call Wings just Paul's backing band, but at the same time, Paul clearly dominated that band in such a way that I don't think we can consider them to be a band of where everybody has significant input in the way that we can some other bands. Certainly not as democratic as the Beatles. I think probably most of the members of Wings would tell you that they would not have had as much input into the sound of Wings as, say, even Bill Wyman or Charlie Watts or Ron Wood have had over the years in the Rolling Stones, Mick Taylor, those guys who were, and all the various members who were not Jagger and Richards. Or at least that's my impression, that all those various members of the Stones over the years have had more say in the shape and direction of the Stones than the non-Paul McCartney members had in Wings. So tell me, what do you think? Am I off base here? Am I not giving the other members of Wings enough credit? Am I giving Paul too much credit for Wings? Or is John right? Is John right that Wings was almost a conceptual band and it was really just Paul McCartney and whoever happened to be playing with him? I don't think I want to go quite as far as John, but I think I'm much closer to John's side than the other side. But let me know what you think. Am I totally off base here? Am I out of my mind? Or do you agree? Just let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.